Okay, this is a lecture for Chapter 13, Adulthood, the Social World. So Erikson originally envisioned 8 stages of development that occur in order from birth to old age. 3 of his stages cover the years after adolescence, but these adult stages are actually less age-based and more based on the crisis itself and resolution of that crisis to move on. Later on in his life, though, Erikson actually stressed that the stages and ages do not occur in a necessary definitive order, meaning that a stage could be skipped entirely, they can kind of switch around, or the ages may be adjusted somewhat. That's kind of important that he actually acknowledged that. Identity versus role confusion is his emerging adulthood stage, where they're trying to figure out who they are, what they want to do, or they just don't care. Intimacy versus isolation, where they can form relationships with others and be intimate, or they're kind of isolated and loners. Generativity versus stagnation, where they're productive members of society, or they're not, they're kind of stuck. And finally, integrity versus despair, where they look back on their lives and they're either proud of what they've done and their accomplishments, or they're not, so they kind of get into this despair. Abraham Maslow described 5 sequential stages. Well, remember we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs way back in the beginning of the semester, where it was a pyramid and you started at the bottom level, and once you satisfied those needs you move to the next level. And the bottom level was basic food, clothing, and shelter, with the top level being self-actualization, where you become the wonderful you that you are. However, later in life, Maslow actually reassessed that level and suggested adding another level after that called self-transcendence, where you actually kind of accept who you are and you become an all-around whole individual. Our personality traits through adulthood are pretty continuous. Genes, parental practices, circumstances, culture are all going to contribute to your personality because how you are raised kind of has a large impact. But genes are probably the most influential. And since genes do not change over time, personality doesn't really change over time. You're not going to all of a sudden become a total liar kind of thing. That's going to be present early on and stay through adulthood. Or you're going to value honesty and be honest through your adulthood. A study actually identified 5 personality traits, which are referred to as the Big 5, that appear in every culture. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and eroticism, also referred to as ocean. So if you are open to new experiences, if you are aware of what's going on and what you're doing, if you are outgoing, if you can compromise and give in, and if you kind of dwell on things. Education is linked to these 5 personality traits. Conscientious people are more likely to complete college. Cheating on exams, if you're low on agreeableness, you're more likely to cheat on an exam. Marriage, extroverts more often marry than introverts. Divorce is more likely for neurotics. IQ is usually higher if you are high on the openness scale. Verbal fluency if you are open and an extrovert. And politically speaking, conservatives are less open, so they score lower on that openness scale. Personality does undergo a positive shift with age. People kind of move from changing the environment to fit their self to changing their self to fit the environment. So they make positive changes in their lives to kind of make them a better you kind of thing. Cohort does affect personality and behavior interaction. Number of children in the family in 1920 versus 1960, for example. People are marrying young, or were marrying younger and having kids younger. Now it's kind of put off more. So that's all going to affect how you're raised and how you raise your children even. Intimacy needs are lifelong, and this is going to vary by culture, age, and of course personality. Adults use their relationships for their social connection that they need, so they have relatives, friends, co-workers, and of course significant others. If you are intimate and can connect with others, you are not going to be isolated and a loner. Cohabitation, living with your partner, is actually the preference for many people. It's common emerging adulthood, but there are some socioeconomic status differences and gender differences. Lower income individuals might cohabitate simply to save money, kind of thing. Living apart together involves a steady romantic partner. You have separate residences and activities, but you are monogamous. You struggle with the financial aspects of the relationship because you are living separate, but so you're having two homes, but yet you're together all the time, kind of thing. So it's a struggle because you're paying bills for two residences, but yet you're together with one person and monogamous. So the question becomes, does marriage lead to personal happiness? Marriage increases community happiness. However, sometimes marriages are not always happy. It's going to vary by gender, education, and age. Research concludes that there are potentially confounding variables that influence this. Money, for example. If you have money problems, that's going to put stress on the marriage. Stepchildren put stress on the marriage, those kind of things. However, it has been found that satisfying marriages do improve your health, your wealth, and your happiness. So if you are in a satisfying marriage, you're going to be healthier, you're going to have more money, and in general have less conflict and be happier. So the question becomes, how would you answer this question? Do you think that you have to be married to be happy? Do you think that marriage causes more problems than it's worth? And we're going to talk about that in class after our presentation, so in 2 weeks basically. Adults often seek committed sexual partnerships because their partners help them meet their needs for intimacy, help them raise children, share resources, so it's going to be more cost-effective, provide care when needed. Married people are a little happier, healthier, and richer than never married ones, but the gap is closing over time. Divorce used to be non-existent in the world. It was when you married for life. Now half of marriages end up in divorce, so the gap is closing between happiness with married people and people that were never married. Sternberg came up with 3 aspects of love: passion, intimacy, and commitment. When all 3 of these are evident, consummate love occurs, reciprocal love occurs. So as long as you have the passion still, as long as you have the intimacy still, we talked about sexual activity and how it's still important in adulthood as a stress relief and as a form of intimacy, and commitment. You want to be monogamous, count on your partner, know they're there for you, kind of thing. So commitment is the most crucial. It correlates with lifelong health and happiness. Over time, over age, ethnicity, personality, education, circumstances, they're going to influence love as well. Couples link their lives over time more and more, and so that commitment is really what bonds them together and what's really crucial for that happiness. Knowing that you can count on your partner and your partner can count on you and you don't have to worry about cheating and things like that is really important for happiness. And if you're happy, you're going to be less stressed. If you're less stressed, you're going to be healthier. An empty nest is when parents are alone after their children have moved out. Once their children have their own lives, go to college, a lot of adults kind of freak out when they have an empty nest. Before, we used to think that this caused controversy in relationships. They had the empty nest, they no longer had their children to focus on, so now they just have each other, and what are they going to do, kind of thing. But we found out through studies that this time actually improves a relationship. It gives them time to explore each other and find out about each other and not have to worry about the children so much. Gay and lesbian partners are very similar to heterosexual partners, actually. The biggest difference is between married and cohabitating partners within this group. Gay marriage just became legal not that long ago, so most gay couples are just cohabitating as opposed to being married. But now that's starting to change as well since gay marriage became legal. All relationships are going to be influenced by the macro system and exosystem. Divorce occurs in 1/3 of the first marriages, and every time you get married after that, your odds of getting divorced increase. Women often suffer more than men, but the men's intimacy needs are at risk. They need that intimacy, so if they get divorced, they have to find it elsewhere. It reduces income, of course, because you usually go from a 2-income household to single-parent households. Sometimes it severs friendships. Your friends have to decide, are they going to go with the husband or the wife? Oftentimes it weakens family ties because of the divorce, so it causes controversy within the family itself. Children sometimes have to decide, do I want to go with mom? Do I want to go with dad? So it causes a lot of conflict. The consequences can actually last for decades and affect the children in both negative and positive ways. Of course, it's going to impact the income. It could also impact the family welfare. Sometimes, though, it actually leads to stronger and warmer parent-child relationships because the children feel like they should support the parent that they live with, kind of thing. And they often show more love towards them, and vice versa. The parents know they have their children there, they can almost count on them, kind of thing. Friends and acquaintances are part of our social gathering and social relations. We have family members, friends, acquaintances, and strangers, but we have this group of people who grow old together and kind of can talk to each other about what's happening during their lives. Even Facebook now allows us to have acquaintances that we would have never had before. We can reconnect with people from high school, that kind of thing. Strangers don't necessarily become strangers anymore. And sometimes a stranger is exactly who you need to talk to. Somebody who doesn't know what's going on in your life and you just kind of need to vent and get it out. When family bonds are similar to friendship bonds, relatives are kind of the focus of this social convoy. They're typically the most crucial members. They're often able to provide practical help and useful advice if a serious problem comes up. So, for example, if you lose your job, if somebody gets ill, somebody passes away, your relatives are there to help you. Friends that last a long time are chosen for their loyalty and help that they provide. And of course, that's a reciprocal relationship, so it's mutual. They provide practical help and advice, and usually these friendships get better over time. They actually help the physical and mental health of the individual because they know that they have a friend there, they can count on them, they encourage them in everything they do, they support them. So universally, humans are healthier if they have social support and sicker if they're isolated socially. Acquaintances do provide information, support, new ideas. Oftentimes your acquaintances decrease with age, but Facebook is kind of changing that now. Consequential strangers are not in the person's friendship circle, but they still have an impact. And like I said before, sometimes you need a stranger to talk to who doesn't know what's going on, who isn't involved directly in the situation. Family links can span generations and, of course, last the longest. Your family's always your family. You can't choose your family. However, sometimes family closeness can be destructive. Sometimes if a family is too close, or if, the mom is too protective or the dad is too protective, that can actually destroy the whole family. Relationships between parents and their adult children are more likely to deteriorate if they continue to live together after the children are adults. In poorer nations, living together may be more closely related to poverty than to the actual affection that is felt. It's more out of need than anything. Happiness is affected by the adult child's well-being. So if the adult child is mentally stable and good to go, happiness is usually surrounding them. All of the research shows that parents provide more financial and emotional support to their adult children than vice versa. So parents give more to their adult children than the adult children give to their parents. Adult siblings can often become mutually supportive. Cultural influences do exist. Some siblings are closer than others. They can help one another cope with a lot of things happening in their lives, especially like parents who are aging, children, marriage, any other elderly relatives. Siblings can kind of bond together and help each other through these situations. Fictive kin includes people who become accepted as part of the family, but they're not genetically or legally related to that family. So a lot of times people will say he's like a brother to me, or she's like a sister to me, kind of thing. It can become important if the blood relatives, when the blood relatives become toxic. Sometimes blood relatives will actually get jealous of this fictive kin because you take better care of them, or you're more helpful with them, you're more social with them, kind of thing. But it can provide a lifeline for adults that were rejected by their original family, so they can kind of reach out to these other individuals who don't actually have a tie to the family. The chief form of generativity is establishing the next generation, guiding that next generation. Every parent is tested and transformed by raising children. Raising children can be a crazy experience, and every parent comes out differently and handles it differently. After the stage of intimacy versus isolation is generativity versus stagnation. So adults want to be productive in a caring way. So they want to be productive members of society. So they satisfy this need by caregiving, working, or even being really creative. Raising a child is probably the most stressful family life experience. Intimacy needs may be postponed because you focus on the children and put the children first. Adult perspectives may be reordered and adjustments are made. That empty nest kind of comes into play here. So when your children are adults and move out, having them not in your home kind of gives you and your partner the opportunity to focus on each other and reconnect these intimacy and fulfill these intimacy needs and change your perspectives back to being about each other. So raising a child can kind of put you through all this stress, and then when they finally are an adult and move on, you can kind of regain your life almost, because when you have children it kind of becomes all about them, and then after they're adults and have their own lives, you can kind of refocus on yours. Children affect their parents through their personality, needs, and just the fact that they exist. Adoptive parents do have a legal connection to the child for life. Current adoptions are usually open so that the adopted child can find out who their biological parents are. But we could have a reactive attachment disorder that may occur where the adoptive child may react poorly to the fact that they find out that they're adopted, and may react poorly to their biological parents for giving them up, kind of thing. Changes are going to be disruptive and effects cumulative when you have step-parents involved. Positive attachment, merging are not always forthcoming. It's very hard. Stepchildren add stress to marriages. Oftentimes you have the stepchildren siding with their biological parent over the step-parent, trying to cause fights on purpose, that kind of thing. A parent will side with their biological child over their stepchild, kind of thing. So step-parents and step-families are really difficult situations to manage. Fostering, though, is the most difficult form of parenting. Usually the child has emotional and behavioral issues, so you usually have to be really involved, and the child usually makes generative attachment difficult because oftentimes you're fostering for a particular period of time. You have to officially adopt them if you want to have them permanently in your home. Grandparenting does provide opportunity for generativity. Grandparents can be productive and be a part of society by helping out with their grandchildren. Most grandparents enjoy being grandparents. Some of them spoil their grandchildren. Some are part of skip generation families, so they're actually taking care of their grandchildren full time. The sandwich generation is middle-aged people who are supposedly squeezed by the needs of the younger and older members of their family. So you have older members, parents and such, wanting stuff from you, and then you have your children and such wanting from you. So you're kind of in the middle. You don't know what to do. You don't know who to give into, so to speak. However, middle-aged adults who provide some financial and emotional help to their adult children are less likely to be depressed than those adults whose children no longer relate to them. So middle-aged adults who keep in contact with their adult children and help them out and are there for them are actually less likely to be depressed than those who just cut ties and you're done. Adults may have psychosocial needs that employment can actually fulfill. Unemployment is associated with child abuse, alcoholism, depression, and a lot of other social problems. Oftentimes you don't feel like you're worthy, you feel useless kind of thing. And a job can actually kind of help fix that. So work meets generativity needs because people can complete tasks. Oftentimes they can express their creative energy, they can help out coworkers, they can mentor people, develop their skills, support the education and health of their families because they're making more money, and also contribute to the community because they're providing goods or services and actually being productive members of society. The extrinsic rewards of work are compensation, so what you get paid. Usually this is more important when people are young. Intrinsic rewards are what you get from inside. Older workers are more likely to experience autonomy and mentor younger workers. So older workers are usually feeling better about themselves and about the fact that they're actually working and being productive. So that's more of an intrinsic reward. They don't care so much about the pay. Absolute income matters more in relation to comparison with others in the same profession, neighborhood, or what you used to make before. So if you switch jobs, you'll compare what you make now to what you made before. If you are in a low-income neighborhood where the cost of living is cheaper versus a higher income neighborhood where the cost of living is more expensive. Or if you're in the same profession as others and you compare what you make kind of thing. So that's when it matters. Unemployment, of course, more stress over the long term than divorce or bereavement. It can really destroy your mental and physical health, and the longer you're unemployed, the more stressful it's going to be and the more detrimental to your health it's going to be. Oftentimes the psychological needs are unmet, so you have a high rate of substance abuse, domestic abuse, other mental health problems, depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. So you don't want to be unemployed for too long unless you have a significant other that's totally taking care of you and you still stay busy. That's the key. Even if you're unemployed, you should still stay busy. Changing jobs can harm your development and increase your stress. Higher salaries, respect, and greater expertise usually come with seniority. So the longer you're at a place, the more money you make and the more you're respected. If you change your jobs, you have to kind of start over. There's less likelihood of rehire for older workers. So if you quit your job and then try to get another job when you're in your 50s, for example, you're less likely to get rehired than if you're in your 30s. And you have a reduction of long-standing intimacy and generativity overall if you keep changing jobs. The standard 9-to-5 schedule is actually becoming unusual in the U.S. 1/3 of U.S. workers have non-standard jobs with non-standard shifts. And unfortunately, this can cause stress for families and parents because you have to try to figure out babysitting and things like that. You may not work the same shift as your partner, so now you have to figure out when you're going to spend time together and things like that. Part-time work and self-employment do not always offer a way to balance out what you have to do with your life. Sometimes if you work part-time, it causes more stress because now you have to figure out what's going to happen only for a few hours and you don't make a lot of money. Self-employment, you might make a lot of money, but oftentimes you have to work crazy hours to get it. So it's not necessarily the solution.